we go.
Okay, are we looking good there?
Yep, I can see it. Thanks.
All right, we ready to rock and roll? All right. Well, first of all, thank you, Scott and team, for welcoming us here tonight at Agile Indy. I think everyone can see the title there, using Azure DevOps to enable state-of-the-art Agile delivery. So we're, again, just very excited to be here. We already did introductions, but I'll just go ahead and cover things again. My name is Chris Seitz. I oversee our cloud practice at Clean Slate. And Shane's joining me tonight. I dragged Shane in because he's just a valuable expert on our team. And he's been participating in the project we're going to showcase tonight. So he's going to add a lot of value as we go through things. Such a privilege to be here and speak. Let me give just a little backdrop on our company and the company and project we're going to showcase tonight. So, of course, Clean Slate, we are a full service cloud consulting firm here in Indianapolis, located in Carmel. And we're all about modernization and cloud, both in the Azure and AWS space. And what we're going to be showcasing for everyone here tonight is a partnership and a project we've been working on with Delta Faucet. So if you're from the Indianapolis area, I'm sure you're familiar with Delta. And if you've got a house with a faucet, you've probably got some of their products running within the confines of your own home. So we're going to talk about, again, and showcase a project that we've been working on together all around the Agile and DevOps space. So here's kind of the journey that we're going to walk through. Now, Scott mentioned earlier that this group really likes, a variety of different speakers and so forth. So I'm sure in a group there's this size that there's some folks that are working in a delivery operation that's very, very mature. And of course, we've worked with some of those operations. And then there's kind of the other extreme, folks that are just starting their journey and wanting to take advantage of Agile best practices and all that can be brought to bear around that. So for tonight's presentation, and what we're going to be talking through is on that end of the spectrum. So we're going to be talking about embarking on that journey to adopt Agile and DevOps. Now, as a practitioner, I think everyone here knows that one of the really important tenets of Agile is really starting all the way back at the customer and what's going on in the market, and understanding how you're delivering products in a way that's flexible and matches what the market is demanding. So instead of us jumping right into ADO, which is kind of the temptation, we actually want to go all the way back and talk about digital transformation and innovating digital products. And again, within the context of our case study tonight, Delta Faucet, and really build the backdrop, the why. Why do this? Why embrace these things? And then we're going to talk about actually building out that digital platform. And then at the end, we'll share some lessons that we've learned, some which might sound common to all of you, and some of them might be fresh and new as well. So I'm going to start by talking about digital transformation. And I've actually given a few presentations this year, and I've always started off with this slide. And the reason that I do is because I think it's really important for everyone to stop and pause and think about the times that we're living in now and the unprecedented change that's going on. I think the change that we're seeing right now is different and probably more overwhelming than maybe any time in my career. And as we see the digital marketplace rising and coming to the forefront, all of these factors are happening and changing at one time. So think about right now, digital offerings are available for everything. And, and I think of digital offerings, there's things like games and so forth, but think now, I mean, I do all my banking digitally. I don't even go to a bank branch any longer. I can do grocery shopping. I can shop for a home remotely. So real estate has been impacted. How about music lessons or dance lessons? Even those are being offered virtually. Gambling and so forth. And even with things like COVID, doctor's office visits, at least for a time, were all being done remotely as well. But then think about the global marketplace. Anyone can get in the market. If you have products, you can pretty easily put up your storefront with just a few clicks. And when companies think about the competition now, they have to think of not just competition here in the States. They have to think about the global market, but even the two teenagers in the garage down the street might come up with something that might actually cause some threat to your business. And then think of all the shifts that are happening in the workforce right now. Remote workers, clearly that's impacting everything. Contractors, freelancers, consultants, temporary workers, self-employed, people that want to work on the move. It's all creating pressure on business. And then technology is always shifting, but I can think of a time when we used to talk about the big three: cloud, big data, mobile. And now there seems to be this everlasting list, never ending, of social, AI, machine learning, IoT. And we're not even talking about some of the emerging technologies that you're starting to hear, like nanobots or autonomous vehicles and so forth. So the theme here is, again, there's so much change going on. And for companies that are trying to operate new and innovative products and threats from the competition are coming up all the time. And again, from my perspective, in a way that's never happened before. Now, I put on the bottom of this slide a really, really short case study just looking at social media. And, you'd think that that's a market that's relatively new and, maybe only two players and not a lot of competition, but it's frankly not the case. Now, there's dozens and dozens of people entering and leaving the social media space, probably daily. But think just back to MySpace. It was the dominant player. They're virtually non-existent. And then Facebook has been the giant or that's for grandma and grandpa. We've moved on from that a long time ago. So again, the whole gist of this is if the social media market in a relatively young industry is fighting off the competition, how much more so for some of the businesses that have been around for a long, long time. So with that in mind, though, let's shift gears now and let's talk about the digital faucet market. Yes, there is a digital faucet market, and specifically a residential digital faucet market. And what's remarkable about this, something that was very new to me about a year or so ago, is that market is huge and expected to grow by about $2 billion worldwide. So that's a tremendous opportunity for companies, again, like Delta Faucet, that are in this space, that they see that, and that's something that they obviously want to capitalize on. Now, like many businesses, there's market drivers that are happening and shifts in the market that are causing some of this. Some of these you might expect. Additional remodeling going on, again, very heavily being influenced by COVID. Folks are at home and they have time on their hands. New home construction, advances in home technology. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. And then just generally higher consumer demand for what they call the durables market. So let's dive into this 1.8 or $2 billion market just a bit further, and have another slide here, again, analyzing the market and how do we go after the market as a business, and what are the drivers that are influencing us. Well, in this case, we see on this graph the durable purchases, so that's things like faucets, and the trend by generation. And what you can see here on the bottom right is that the major growth in this industry is these younger generations. That's where the spend is happening. That's where the purchasing is happening. So that's a shift for companies like Delta, who in a traditional market, now I'm faced with millennials who purchase differently, research products differently, they shop differently. But on top of all that, there's a very important characteristic of this group, and they are the early tech adopters. And so what that means is they want tech, they need tech, and in fact, in a lot of cases, if I have two faucets and they're identical, the one that has tech clearly must be better because it has tech. So that's a major shift, that I have a younger generation, and that younger generation wants tech. And so I need to make some shifts in my go-to-market strategy, again, if I'm a company like Delta. So all that to say is a backdrop that really applies to, I'm guessing, everyone who's attending tonight, the businesses that you're a part of, is the market is shifting, there's unprecedented change, and the companies that are sensitive to that, and they're adaptable, they have innovation on their mind, and they're built for resiliency, that companies that are embracing that are going to be the ones that are going to survive and thrive in the digital economy. Now, because of this, businesses are looking to technology leaders, which is a lot of folks that are on our presentation tonight, more than ever, because of this shift, not just in digital and the digital marketplace, but the ability to tack and veer and so forth. So what's that mean to companies like Delta? Well, they're a traditional manufacturing company. And so they've got a certain operation that's tried and true for them. Now, some of you might be familiar with this slide here, which talks about bimodal. This is a concept that Gartner introduced actually several years ago. And it was a philosophy or a model or even a mindset that companies that had perhaps a more traditional model, what they called mode one, we're going to have to eventually start considering a more, I'll say, agile or digital model, what they called mode two. And the implication here isn't that one is better than the other. The implication is that one is suited for a certain type of market and the other is suited for a different type of market. So if your market is traditional with well understood products and predictable, then mode one is actually going to suit you very, very well. And in fact, with Delta, that's the case. They have a very successful traditional delivery model that's primarily focused on mechanical products. But if your market has a need for digital products, which are still products that have some uncertainty and still has some uncertainty in the marketplace, where you might want to shift and have to adjust and tack and veer, then a different mode of operation should be adopted, not necessarily replace the old one, but in some cases, and in fact, in this case, to complement what you have. And this is very much the situation for Delta and what they've been facing. So to kind of lay that out for you, and I'll say, and I kind of to prep for the remainder of the presentation, we've got, again, this kind of traditional model of delivering products. which tends more towards the mechanical side, physical faucets that are going out the door. And now we have digital products, in some cases firmware coupled with mechanical products, but in other cases, enabling ecosystem that needs to be developed and evolved. And again, a lot of uncertainty. And so a different delivery mode, a different delivery model needs to be brought together to deliver this kind of new age digital transformation for Delta. Okay, so we see mechanical, we see digital. So how's that going to happen? We want to innovate and bring digital products to market. Where do we start if we're Delta Faucet, and where do we go? Well, the good news for Delta is they actually have a long history of product innovation. And product innovation has actually been a big part of their DNA. So that's crucial, because the mindset, the approach, the desire to create and be curious and break the mold and try things differently is already part of the DNA. So that's going to prove to be a very important part of the picture here. So just to give you a little bit of history, I would never say I'm an expert on the Delta Faucet product line or any of their history. But honestly, if you go out to their website, they've got a whole section where it talks about their history of innovation and their different products. It's clearly a part of their identity. But if you go all the way back to 1958, and I didn't know this, but they were the first ones to innovate and create the single handle faucet that came out of Delta all the way back in 1958. And again, you can kind of scan through these. They were the first ones to come out with the kitchen faucet that you pull out, and aren't those wonderful? They've had some other technologies that come out with, like Brilliance, which is all about the finish, and they put a lifetime warranty on their finishes. And then you start seeing in 2011 their Touch 2.0 technology. So now we're getting the merge of the mechanical and the digital, where we're putting firmware into the faucets for touch activation. And of course, this goes on and on and on. But again, the point here is this mindset, and part of the DNA is all around this innovation. Now let's take this a step further. And again, this is all about the backdrop of why would I even do Agile and consider that, and what is really the case to the business case around that. Well, this is the market today. Of course, you've got plumbing products that are in the market and have been in the market for a long time. But you marry that with a lot of the momentum that's coming with the smart home initiatives. So that's everything around the connected home, lighting and temperature and all of the products, music, all those things that are being connected, and security around the smart home. But you combine that in the context with plumbing, and the emphasis now, yes, this is a real thing, again, all new to me a year ago, personalized water experiences. And you might have heard years ago, Ford Motor Company talked about, well, we used to be an automobile company, we've shifted now to a transportation company. Well, this is in that same vein. So what's a personalized water experience mean? That means consumers want to, as an example, I want to get up in the morning, I want to go into the bathroom, I want my sauna to sense that I am near and therefore start warming up. When I go to the shower, I want the shower to turn on at my temperature that I prefer. I want the lighting to be in at the level that I prefer. I want music to be streamed in through my my shower head for the music that I like to start my day with. And all of that should be personalized to me. That is a personalized water experience. Now, there's a lot more around all that. I'm sure you guys have seen the commodes with night lights and so forth and all that. But think about that personalized water experience and what that means as that grows in the market. And how does a company shift to address some of those needs. So for Delta, again, I talked about they had a innovation model and an innovation mindset already in the company. And one of the things that I'll say impressed me with them is they have taken very intentional steps and actions in their company to enable innovation. So they've created new branding that's all around innovative products. So they have products that they're releasing that are specifically branded under an innovation brand. They also have specific departments in the company that are targeted to do nothing more than research and develop innovative products. Now, that's not the only place where innovation goes on, but it's looked at as kind of the spearhead to cascade that out within the company. Now, as you see on the left, they've got a model which is very typical for companies who have embraced this sort of thing. They start off with innovating and prototyping, and as those products those ideas become viable, they move to MVP offerings, and then they do early market testing, and essentially move through until they scale up and out to become part of what they call core products and so forth. Now, this diagram on the right, what that is showing is the situation with this digital strategy of, okay, so I'm out, I'm innovating, I'm creating these ideas, and these ideas are turning into MVP products, and that's all great, and we're making tremendous progress, but there's something here in the middle that's missing. And that thing in the middle that's missing, or that requires some additional investment to make all of this digital strategy real, there's two things that are missing. One is I need a way to consistently build and deliver these products, even if I'm back in the MVP stage. It helps with collaboration and synergy as these products ultimately come together and will ultimately be connected. I need something that gives me a consistent delivery mechanism, and that will provide visibility and let lots of folks come and collaborate and work together to bring these products to life. That's number one. Number two is, as these products come to life, if I want to connect them to create that seamless customer experience, there needs to be some set of services in the middle that will act as the linchpin to connect all of these. So we've got a gap, and we've worked on some of these things, but what do we do to really invest and create this digital platform that will take us into the next generation of what we want to do? And so that's what we're going to talk about. And when that investment takes place, this is what we want to see. We want to see something where there's a digitally enabling platform that has those two components that I mentioned, and it's going to enable the web apps that are needed for my firmware-based products. And I'm going to integrate that with voice skills to voice enable all of these things for that water experience. But then as I deliver those, I want consistency, I want the right code quality, I want things automated, and I want it all pushed out into my cloud tenant to create an excellent customer experience. So how do we get that platform, and what's that platform look like? And that is what we're going to talk about next. So we've talked about the why. Why do we need to do all this? And now Shane's going to talk about building that digital platform.
Thanks, Chris. So that was a great overview of the where and the whys for everything that I'm about to talk about. But I want to jump now into some of the what's and the how's around this digital platform that we helped Delta to create. Before we get into too many details with that, though, I want to first cover some of the goals of what we were actually trying to accomplish. Since Delta is a company that's traditionally been focused in manufacturing, their transformation into a software development organization, a software services company, just a technology organization was not something that would necessarily be easy for everybody during that transition. Working with Delta, we were able to identify some goals and objectives that everybody agreed had to be met in order for this transition to successfully be navigated. Using Delta's terminology, their language, what they really wanted was an adaptable assembly line to build their digital products. It wasn't good enough to just have a successful product, but it was necessary to scale the building and delivery of that successful product and many more of those, so that way they're a successful organization. Looking at some of these goals that were identified, with the audience, for this presentation, you're going to quickly identify that some of these are more around your internal team's processes, whereas some of these are more solved with technology. And we learned that with Delta, in order to build this digital platform, it was very much that, a melding of the people that they had inside of the company and enabling those people with processes and technology. As many teams will tell you, their people are some of their most valuable assets. And that's where we wanted to make sure that we had the emphasis of our focus was around those people. We wanted to make sure that we understood the roles and responsibilities of the people within the team. And once we started to understand who was in the team and what their roles were, we helped Delta to provide some definition and clarification around those roles. And sure enough, their people were very valuable assets that we wanted to really be able to empower and scale. Taking those people, and helping them scale, we wanted to help them understand the processes that they were working with, and some of those processes were, exactly what they needed to be, but some of them were also, I'll say biased by their manufacturing background. And we worked with Delta to help them not just define, but also refine those processes. As you can imagine, for people who have been working for years in a manufacturing industry, some of this was kind of eye-opening in some of the shifts that they had to make in order to adopt this. But fortunately, Delta, they not only embraced, but they really pushed hard to help with some of this organizational change to adopt these new processes. And then lastly, the technology side of things, one of the goals that we looked at earlier was around automation. And in order to automate things, technology is a pretty core tool to do that. But even as a technologist, I understand technology's purpose isn't there to be the main focus of things. Technology is really there to help everything else. The people were one of the most important assets that Delta had, and the process and technology are really there to scale those people. And while you and I may be a little special in that we really do like process, most people don't. And the more of that process we can automate and get out of the way with technology, the better. So that's really where technology comes into play here with building this digital platform. Now, if you're thinking that all of this is the ideal waterfall project, I'd love to hear your opinions on why over a Zoom drink. But for us, pretty early on, it became clear that an Agile approach would probably be the best approach to help Delta meet their needs here. 3 of the delivery goals that we showed earlier are very much around the processes, being customer-centric with their products, their speed to market, and their internal team collaboration. Those are all greatly facilitated by an Agile approach. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but being able to help their internal teams processes deliver these goals, we help them adapt from their waterfall approaches and identify that a Scrum approach would probably be at least a viable way to go about managing these processes. And again, surprisingly for a manufacturing company, Delta embraced and pushed pretty hard to help enact the organizational change to support the migration to an agile team and agile processes within the team. For Delta, this is an oversimplification of what that actually meant and how we would actually onboard their teams and start to manage those agile processes. This is kind of a simplified view of what the onboarding schedule might look like, and then what that steady state schedule might look like. And this accounts for availability of different roles within the team and everything. Make sure that no person on the team was overloaded at any portion of the 2-week iteration. But we took a Scrum approach for the development needs for the organization. We use this for the higher level portfolio and product management. We also use this for the sprint Scrum teams. And this was something that's been embraced really well. But after a while, we actually realized that there was a bit of a gap where, there was a bit of a mismatch in how we were managing some of this stuff. For development, this worked great, but what we were managing was a little more than development. There was also some infrastructure and support related issues. And when you're onboarding somebody and they come to you with a support request where they need help being onboarded to some portion of the infrastructure, the answer they're looking for is not, I'll look into getting that scheduled in here in a couple sprints for you. That's not really the answer that people want when they're asking for support. So we adjusted a little bit, and we realized that for our infrastructure team who are fielding these support requests, we actually need to be a little more adaptive than what Scrum allowed for. So we actually took the infrastructure team, we split their capacity. It was about 50-50 with managing Scrum scheduled work, and then also taking a Scrumban approach for some of these ad hoc requests. And we kind of adjusted the way they worked, and this actually ended up being a great adjustment that solved a lot of the pain points with if you want to call it scope creep for your sprint, which you should largely avoid. This was a way that allowed us to manage that, and it worked well for everybody. We kind of track these support requests in our daily stand-ups on the same Scrum teams. So it was a bit of a melding of approaches here, but it's actually worked really, really well for the team to both have infrastructure plans for building out different things and onboarding different things where it is something that can be scheduled and planned into your sprints, but also being able to have the availability to support those ad hoc requests that are more than just a few emails going back and forth. With that 50-50 split, the infrastructure team actually had the capacity to support those. Now, like I said, what we're managing here is a pretty large landscape of things. So I want to cover that real quick. What Delta is managing here, they've got mobile applications for their products, but they also have cloud applications. They have voice assistant applications. They have physical devices, IoT devices running firmware, and that firmware needs to have over-the-air updates coming in over the cloud. Those IoT devices are sending telemetry back to cloud services. All of this interacts with third-party services, music services, lighting services. There's all sorts of authentication integrations that need to be taken care of. And that's just the consumer side of the products. You've also got the back end side of that. You've got infrastructure teams, you've got operations teams who are monitoring services and providing support. Now, managing all of this, from a work standpoint is great and all, but if you're going to do all that manually, that's almost game over from the beginning. Back to our delivery goals, automation was one of those delivery goals that we looked at there, and speed to market was as well. So if we're managing all those things I just covered and doing it, we have to really embrace DevOps. And this was something that we learned early on, and fortunately, it was something that was pretty obvious to us too. It wasn't a hard lesson to learn. But the goal here was automation. Automate everything, and that means everything you possibly can. Compiling your code, sure. Releasing your applications, yeah, of course. Unit testing, yeah, sure, absolutely. But provisioning new infrastructures, running static code analysis, configuring your different environments. Right now, I think they've got about a dozen or so non-production environments, and we're spinning up a couple a month right now, and sometimes, just upon request. And being able to stand these things up quickly and easily, it is hard unless you're able to have that automated. So not only is this automation practical, it's again helping us meet some of those design goals: speed to market, automation, operational excellence, and even security. That was one of our core goals earlier, was security. And if we're able to not only automate things, but build security into that automation, that starts to eliminate human error, which can cause potential security holes and vulnerabilities. And now not only do we have security, but we have security that scales as well. So managing these agile processes, automating the delivery of these things, that's kind of the what of what we were trying to accomplish. But now let's talk about the how. And this starts to bring us into Azure DevOps. And before we get too deep, I want to level set real quick. And I actually want to talk about what is Azure DevOps. And since I got to write the slide, I put it on the slide. Azure DevOps is a suite of product offerings with deep integration. Just like Microsoft Office is more than Word, Azure DevOps is more than just a ticketing system. And usually when you talk about Azure DevOps, there's 5 components that you really want to focus on talking about. And you don't have to use all of these, but you can use all of these. And they're all pretty deeply integrated with one another. So first of all, you've got Azure DevOps boards, ADO boards. That is the ticketing portion of Azure DevOps. And that's really where you manage your work. And this is the integration point for people. It's kind of equivalent to a Jira. Next, you've got ADO repos. This is where your source control lives, and this is your integration point for code and technology, kind of equivalent to Bitbucket and GitHub. But these aren't standalone siloed products. There's deep integration between the two of them. So for me as a developer, let's say I've got some tasks that I've got scheduled for the sprint that I want to work on. I can go into ADO boards and I can use my ticket to actually go branch my code, go create the feature branch I'm going to work in, and actually push my code there and ultimately submit a pull request back. When that pull request finally gets approved, that status comes back to my ticket in ADO boards. And there's a deep level of integration there. So that way, not only am I enabled to do my work faster, but that status, that progress is transparently communicated to the rest of the team. And whether it's a tester, project program manager, whomever, just other developers, they can quickly and easily see what I'm working on, where it is. And let's say I need help with another developer, they can quickly go look at my ticket and go see what branch I'm working out of, and go pull that branch down and start working with the same code that I'm working with. So that level of integration and just the ability to transparently communicate where things are, what's happening, it's a great value add with that integration. So that was ADO repos. Next, we've got ADO pipelines. This is where a lot of the automation happens. Think kind of a Jenkins equivalent or GitHub Actions. This is where all of your automation orchestration happens, whether that's builds, releases, automated testing, static code analysis, submission of code to third-party services, submission of mobile applications to third-party services that tested on thousands of virtual phones or even physical phones. All of that orchestration can be driven there by pipelines. And again, there's that deep integration with the other products, the repos and boards. So I can see whether my task that I've completed and I've merged my code in, whether it's actually been deployed to something or not, or where it's at in the pipeline, if it's waiting for approvals or quality gates, I can see that. Next, we have ADO artifacts. This is kind of an equivalent to Artifactory, if you're familiar with that. This is where the things that you build with ADO pipelines live when you're done with them. Now, ideally, when you build code and release it, those are two separate things. You're going to build the code, and that build process creates artifacts, whether that's binaries or configuration files. You've got artifacts, and those artifacts are what you want to manage. So if I make a application release and I compile the code, I get some binaries. I want those binaries to be deployed to a dev environment for me to use, as a developer. And ultimately that would later be promoted to a QA environment where my QA team, who's got my back, I'm the developer, QA team's got my back, they're going to test it and everything. And ultimately that same set of binaries would eventually be pushed to production. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that the fact that this same set of binaries are being moved around. The alternative there is when you deploy to dev, you compile the code. When you deploy QA, again, this is the alternative. You would compile what's probably the same code, is probably going to have the same functionality, and that's going to go to QA, and your testers are going to test there. And when you go to production, again, you're going to compile what's probably the same code. It's probably going to have the same functionality. It's probably going to pass the same test, and now it's going to production. And all those probablys are just no good. There's no sure bets or anything in software development, but the more variables you can remove, the better. So if instead of pushing out that something that's probably the same, if it actually is the same thing, then I've got higher confidence that what I'm pushing to production is really, in fact, what I want it to be. Then the last product here I want to talk about is ADO test plans. I'll admit this is the one that I'm most ignorant about. I've never been the driver of this platform, but it's a testing platform that a QA team can live and breathe in, and they can manage their automated tests. They can manage their manual testing there. They can set up test suites, that they can generate different groupings of suites, and they can apply those to the different tickets that are up in ADO board. So when I, as a developer, merge code in and I think I'm done with this, the QA person who's going to test it can assign a suite of tests to run against that branch, and all those automated tests will be ran, pretty quickly. And then they can also track what manual tests have been ran, what need to be ran, what their current statuses are, and everything. And this provides a very nice level of transparency whenever they solve a problem, or whenever they see a problem. I, as the developer, I've got that transparent view at essentially what is breaking, why is it breaking, what do I need to do to fix it. And then not only do I see it as a developer, but everybody else on my team, up through management and everything, can see how stable or not things are. So I want to now we've kind of talked about what Azure DevOps is. I want to start jumping into how we've actually used those different portions of ADO with Delta to help us build this digital platform. With ADO boards, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Jira. If you're not familiar with ADO, boards, there's a hierarchy of work item types, and with Jira, there's a hierarchy of issue types that you can configure. And in Azure DevOps, this is defined by what's called a process template. And Microsoft provides a handful of process templates for you to use. I think there's one called Agile, there's one called Scrum, there's one called CMMI. And what we used for Delta was actually a customized version of the CMMI process template. And if you're familiar with Azure or with Agile, most of these boxes and what they're named make sense to you, and they're very much exactly as you would expect. But so an initiative is your very high level bucket of epics, your collection of epics. It's not something that people who are working day to day in a sprint are going to be paying too much attention to. But that allows management to do some big picture road mapping, long-term road mapping, make hiring decisions, funding decisions, and everything. Next, you've got epics. These are kind of a breakdown item that you use pretty heavily in road mapping the progression of these initiatives. Now a feature is something that might be a little bit new to some people. And in this case, what we call a feature is really a releasable bundle of of functionality. And I'll come back to this here in just a minute and describe that a little bit more once I've defined these lower items. Next, we've got this box called a requirement, and you may be familiar with user stories or PBIs. This is really the same thing there. One thing that was important with Delta, though, is they wanted to stick to some terminology that they used internally, and the word requirement was a hill they were willing to die on. So we've got a box here called requirement. Now, if you go look at how we built this thing out, the very first text box in there is a big one that says user story. So we're working with Delta, with where they are and with what their history is and what they're comfortable with, and trying to help them improve and grow towards this agile future that they're going to be operating in with their digital platform. But this requirement box, it's just what you would expect. user story to be, and we're just using that word requirement because that's what they're comfortable with. And then lastly, a task is the technical breakdown for those requirements, those stories. Back to that feature though, this is a level of the hierarchy that a lot of groups will skip. And we felt this was important for them because just because you had a requirement that had been met doesn't necessarily mean that that's a requirement that's releasable. And if you take an administrative piece of functionality, for example, that's managing users, you may have all sorts of requirements on how you can manage those users, but you're also going to have some security requirements around those. And if you've got some of those requirements met, but not those security requirements, you absolutely better not be releasing that thing, right? And this feature allows us to group these things into a thing that's now releasable. So if a feature is partially done, but not completely done, well, that's not something you should be releasing. Once all the requirements within that feature are accomplished and done, then now that's a thing that you can now release. And that's the purpose of what this feature box provides. And then also the other breakdown I want to show you here, there's two different colors of boxes here. And what we ended up finding out was that they wanted their program management team and people doing the road mapping, they wanted those people to focus more on those upper tier boxes from initiatives down through features. And to them, those features were a low level detail. But as you and I know, when you're planning a sprint, you need to get a lot more detail to that. And when you're actually breaking down your stories and requirements, you need to get a lot more detail than that. So those upper tier boxes, those were great for road mapping purposes and providing strategy and direction to the sprint team. But when it came time to schedule your sprints for your Scrum team, your Scrum team really lives in those green areas down there. So you would have your BAs and architects start to provide those requirements and stories, and then your developers would test those out, and you would start getting some just-in-time estimates around those, so that way that can facilitate your sprint planning. So this was how we designed ADO boards for Delta, and this helped us manage the work. I now want to shift a little bit to the DevOps side of things. Now, with DevOps, there's always the question, where do we start? And we shared this slide with a lot of our clients to help frame the conversation and set the tone for those conversations around DevOps. A lot of people far too often oversimplify the term DevOps to mean an automated compile and deploy of your code or of your application. But DevOps is really so much more than that. The choices for the tooling, the technologies that are available can very quickly be overwhelming. And I could spend all night talking about the slide. Shoot, I could spend all night talking about just one of these boxes in this slide. And if you have your DevOps person, you ask them, hey, go pick out a thing to do real quick. And tell us what your DevOps plan is. That's not something you do real quick. This is a multi-year project to stick somebody on. So the point I'm trying to make is, what does DevOps mean is a very complicated question. And since that's not really what we're here to talk about, I'm going to fast forward and say for Delta, it means this. We pulled out a lot of those things, and we worked with Delta to identify some tools that they already had in place, some gaps that they had in place, and help them identify some tooling to fill in those gaps. And the end game picture of what DevOps means for Delta, and by end game I mean for now, because everything's changing. For now, this is what DevOps means for Delta. And one thing I want to point out is ADO is kind of pretty all over this visual here. You have Azure boards in the very first box, and in the second to last box, orchestration and scheduling, you've got Azure DevOps and Azure pipelines, and there's quite a few ADOs in between. Spoiler, ADO is kind of the glue that helps hold a lot of this DevOps together for us. So the other parts of ADO, we looked at ADO boards before for the human entry point, but now we've got the technology entry points into ADO and repos, pipelines, and artifacts. This is really the meat and potatoes that drives DevOps for us. The orchestration is largely driven by pipelines, but greatly facilitated by repos and artifacts. Ultimately what I'm showing here is what that DevOps template looked like that we provided for Delta. And I'm saying template here. This isn't DevOps for an application. This is quote unquote the DevOps automation picture for all code. Application code, web application code, mobile application code, infrastructure automation code, firmware code, all of the code goes through this template. And what you'll see this template managing, it's not just technology, but it starts with the people, the developers. You've got team notifications at the very end. Again, it comes back to the people on the team. But everything in between facilitates either automation of technology or transition points from technology to people. You see that there are pipelines in the middle to release to different environments, but what you don't see there are, before the release to QA, for example, that's not going to just go out there because the developer checks more code, and you've actually got a button that the QA manager has to push before it's going to turn their world upside down. Because if they're in the middle of some complicated testing, you bet they're not going to be happy if we just start pushing things without their permission, right? So we have this template manage all of our code for all portions of the system, and it greatly facilitates communication within the team. And when we say team communication, team notifications on the bottom left corner of this diagram, that's actually Microsoft Teams. And whenever an environment gets something that's ready to be pushed, there will be buttons that pop up on people's Teams notification inside their Teams app, so that way when they're ready to have that release go to the QA branch, for example, that QA manager can push that button to turn their world upside down, because who knows what kind of quality that new release is going to be, right? And if you're the QA team, it's all those developers just tossing stuff over the fence, right? So you want to make sure that they've got that control in place and that they're comfortable to have their environment change on them and only have it happen when they're ready. Now, like I said, this DevOps automation automates all the code for us. And back to our delivery goals, I keep going back to these delivery goals. And the reason I keep going back to these delivery goals is because from an Agile perspective, we should only be doing what's necessary and what's providing value. And anything that's not necessary or providing value is waste. And these delivery goals, should be things that drive everything that we're doing. If we're doing something that's not helping us reach a delivery goal, then one of two things is happening. Either I'm wasting my time because it's unnecessary, or maybe we haven't defined the right goals. And if we haven't yet defined the right goals, there probably should be a conversation about that so we can define the right goals and everybody on the team knows what they're working towards. So two of the delivery goals that this automation really helps us towards is, code is everything, taking all of our institutional knowledge and codifying it, making sure that it's captured in something that is available to everybody on the team. Code is everything. And then the other one, automate everything, trying to take processes out of the way for people and just let the processes be automated as much as possible, but giving the humans, the people, our most valuable assets on the team, the ability to do what they need to do and not have stuff just trample over their QA environment when they're in the middle of doing their testing. It all goes back to the people. Now, I've shown you a lot of stuff and we've talked about a lot of things, but why does any of this even matter? And I'll say this is why it matters. We're providing value. We are providing a lot of value. We're not done. We're not perfect. We certainly have some organizational change that's still working its way through. A manufacturing company doesn't wake up Agile, overnight. And we're still building the ship, so to speak. But really, the results that we've seen are undeniable. The quality of the digital assets that Delta has have increased tremendously. Just take unit testing as an example. They had about a 10% coverage a year ago, and they're up to about 90% coverage right now. That's, is it perfect? No, but that's really a huge increase in the quality of what they have in place. If we look at delivery rates, they've they've improved by orders of magnitude. A year ago, it would have taken about 2 months to spin up a new environment. It takes about 10 minutes now. And most of those is waiting for a Redis cache to provision in Azure. It's really a very fast automated task to go stand up a new environment. Release cycles improving from a multi-week process to a 1 hour process, and orders of magnitude to help them, be able to operate more smoothly and just get their products to market faster. And then the other thing, the reliability of what they have in place has increased. We've eliminated human error from quite a few parts of the processes, and we've also, just the amount of time that we save with this automation in place, and not only the automation, but also the levels of communication that the tooling is able to provide, the digital platform. It brings everything together to really just improve the world for Delta and their digital team here. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Chris as we start to go over some of the lessons we've learned going through this journey with Delta.
Yeah, so congratulations, Agile Indy. You made it through the journey with us, and thank you for sticking it out with us to get this far. You've got your badge for the day. I hope you've gained some insight from the journey that we've been through. We really wanted to cover some lessons learned to share with you folks. Again, some of these you might say, yep, this is common and we've experienced these, and some of these hopefully you'll find perhaps unique and maybe even that you can take back to your team and your operation. So focusing here first on digital transformation and agile adoption from a business and product perspective, some really important keys to success that I'll say we experienced. I mentioned this earlier in the presentation. I just can't say enough about Delta Faucet and their intentional and deliberate actions within the company to embrace innovation and in this case, digital innovation. I mentioned earlier that they've had set apart brands and set apart teams and use those things to spearhead ideation and creation and so forth. And the fact that that's part of their DNA, just really crucial that you take those active and deliberate steps. Also wanted to talk about Agile, and I hope you guys caught the thread of starting all the way back to from the market perspective and bringing it forward into your business. And, Agile is great. We are absolutely fans of it. But as we discussed in the presentation and even in some of the things that Shane talked about, there are cases where, it fits extremely well. Hint there when you're innovating and new products and product delivery. But it's really okay if you've got some things in your company that you're delivering that are predictable and follow those sequential steps. And maybe waterfall is still okay to use for those things. Fit it to your business. There's no shame in using what works. And clearly, we took some liberty in what we implemented to tailor the agile processes to fit the business. I think there's clearly some cases, and again, we highlighted some where, hey, I need some work done. I need you to change the configuration on a sandbox, and I need it now. The response of, I'll see if I can fit it into the next sprint, isn't always received real well. So that absolutely impacted us saying, well, how do we fit this without, disposing of everything? In the case of Delta, many of the products that we're dealing with are still in the MVP stage. And because of that, they've been focused on delivering that minimal set of value. And now that we're bringing and investing and bringing all this up, think enterprise. So it's easy to overlook, even if you're a mature operation, it's easy to overlook things like costs, as your cloud subscriptions go up, scaling out products as they go out to market, and things like security. They're talked about often, but again, thinking enterprise is something that needs to be on the radar. If you're not thinking of it in the MVP stage, it's got to be built into that innovation process. So as you scale up, these things are taken into consideration. And then finally, on the keys to success, I'm sure this is near and dear to everyone's heart. You just can't educate and communicate enough. And educate and communicate and rinse and repeat, and explaining and sharing and providing information to not just the team, but those outside the team, those in the organization, what you're doing, why you're doing it, how it's going to add value. You can't assume everyone's connected to your goals and your objectives. And so providing that education and communication, absolutely crucial. Now, some things to avoid. Again, some of these might be commonplace, and I think a couple here might resonate with many of you. Avoid thinking the launch is the end of the effort. Oh, great, we got ADO, we got it turned on, and it's set up and it's ready to go. Whew, glad we're done. No, we're not done. Actually, we just started. So understanding that it's a journey is crucial to this. So avoid that kind of project mindset. We're going to get to the end and then we're done. We can go back to normal life. Second item here: talking tools instead of value and outcomes. Very difficult, even for the team. We would often say, the ADO project. We're implementing ADO, and I hope you caught through this presentation that it's much more than that. And so having to be a little careful about making sure, while it's convenient to use some of that nomenclature, that your value and your outcomes don't get lost, that we're building a platform, we're enabling digital products. We're not implementing ADO. And then finally, I think anyone that's gone through a transition around Agile understands this shift in mindset of, yes, I want to do these sprints and these increments, and I'm going to pull in work based on priority. And then, boy, someone comes in and says, well, here's your deadline, though. Okay, well, we don't do deadlines anymore, unless you're talking about, the end of the sprint, and you want to call that a deadline. I suppose you can. So again, there's just making sure that you stick to the goals, which is keeping the flexibility, while still being mindful that there are dates and so forth, but not letting them drive the ultimate outcomes. And finally, just a couple of considerations. Kind of talked about this a little bit already. There is a cultural shift that, again, I'm sure this group is more than aware of, but making sure that knowledge share and socialization is going on in the organization, making sure you're sharing some of the new terminology and so forth that you guys saw through much of the content that we presented tonight. And then, I'll always say success is contagious. Let others participate and engage in the process. We had and have had a lot of teams that maybe are outside what we're directly doing, asked to participate, asked to learn, asked to share in what we're doing. And I would highly encourage everyone to share with others, let them participate. Folks, surprisingly, will sometimes even donate their time to help. And that success is just tremendously contagious. So again, something to consider there.
So a little bit on the ADO side of lessons learned, rather than giving you a step-by-step guide on how to set up and install ADO, and thought you might not appreciate that. Since we did actually do that though with Delta, as they were migrating from being a manufacturing company to becoming a software and technology company, we did stand their ADO environment up from scratch, and we did learn some lessons through that process. And I want to share a few of those with you. So first of all, rather than just jumping into a tool like ADO, it's really important that you understand the people and the processes that you're really trying to put this tool in place for. ADO should not drive your team. Your team should drive ADO, and how your team operates, that should drive how ADO is configured. So if you don't know who your people are and how they operate, that's where you should really start, not with the technology and tooling. Next, Microsoft provides some standard process templates that you can use and leverage, and go find the one that fits your team the best, and then go customize it from there. That allows you to leverage Microsoft's development teams for any kind of updates and maintenance they provide to those templates. But again, customize to what you need it to be. Don't force your team to operate how those templates are built, but go take that template and wrangle it around to make it look like what your team looks like. One thing we learned also was around naming conventions. These are really important things. It's easy to say, oh, that's just a technical thing, but I'm sure most people on the call would agree with me. Most big problems and big mistakes that happen all come back to miscommunication. And when you're operating in the cloud at enterprise scale, miscommunications can be very costly. And if you don't have naming conventions in place, then it's pretty easy to make a big oops in production because you thought this was something else. These naming standards are absolutely critical to make sure that not just for your IT people to organize things, but to make sure that the right decisions are being made on in your infrastructure, on your different digital assets. Absolutely critical. And then for automation, if things aren't standardized, you really can't automate things. Next, there are some configuration areas in Azure DevOps called teams and areas. These are ways that you would categorize and group your technology assets and your people. And it's easy when you go in there. It's tempting to break things down to the nth degree, but our recommendation is don't do that. Break these down and make them only as complex as your teams of people are, and no more complex than that. You'll end up regretting it and wasting a lot of time and losing a lot of transparency and just knowledge in the system if you break them down and make them too complex. So when you break down the teams and areas, keep them simple. Don't go overly complex with those. And lastly, the last key success that we learned was ADO's got a lot of deep integrations, and sometimes they can be overwhelming, and they might take some education, but really, really embrace them, because once your team starts understanding how they work and are able to use them as second nature, it really, it goes through the roof what you're capable of using the tooling for. And down to the what to avoid, on that exact same point, all that functionality can be overwhelming. And if there's pieces of ADO that you don't want to use, turn it off. Don't let it be a distraction. If you've got source code that needs to be publicly available, ADO repos may not be the best tool for you. Maybe GitHub is a better place to host your code. So turn off repos and keep your code in GitHub, and do what you can to integrate with that instead. But remove the distractions if there's parts of the tooling that you just don't want to use. One interesting thing that we did with Delta was we kind of did a little case study, a little test of trying to implement waterfall in ADO. And we learned, don't do that. There are some great tools to manage waterfall projects. ADO is not one of them. You can try to shove a round peg in the square hole, but that round peg is not going to come out round anymore once you try to do that. And it's just not going to result in anybody being happy. So, again, don't even try waterfall in ADO even a little bit. It's not something that works well at all.
Hey, Shane, I don't know if it's clear here what your feelings are about this particular topic.
No, absolutely not. Don't do it. use Excel. I mean, seriously, it'll be a better tool than ADO for a waterfall project. Use Notepad. The other thing that's actually really tempting to do, though, is to design your ADO around your reporting needs. ADO is great for managing Agile teams. It's great for managing work. It's great for managing, your DevOps. It's not great for managing resource allocations and personnel management. Don't try to build your ADO teams out to facilitate your resource managers. It can be done, but you're going to be making a lot of compromises, and the end result will be something that will still have compromised results. And now you're impacting your team because of the compromises you put into the tool that drives their day-to-day work. And instead, something ADO is good at is taking the data that's in there and making it available to external reporting tools such as Power BI or Tableau or something like that. So use those external tools for that complex reporting. Don't compromise your day-to-day system that your team lives in order to facilitate your reporting. There are better options there. And the last couple considerations I want to point out. First of all, when you have specialized security requirements, that may force some design decisions for you with ADO. For example, if you've got security related things with DoD, where your overseas teams can't have access to it, that'll probably drive some decisions on how you're going to design your ADO hierarchy, different projects and organizations in there and everything. So make sure you understand those security requirements before you get too deep with your ADO design, because some of those will force your hand with some design decisions. They're all things that can be accommodated, but just make sure that you do accommodate them and know what you need to accommodate pretty early on. And the other thing is, despite our showcasing kind of a Scrum setup in ADO, it's really flexible, and Scrum is not at all the only thing it can do. Trying to drive a Kanban, a full Kanban driven methodology out of ADO works really well. It does. There's some documentation on what things you want to use for a Kanban, what things you don't want to use for Kanban, and Microsoft's got quite a bit of documentation on how you want to adopt it to different methodologies. And just as an example, they even have quite a bit of documentation on how to map your safe artifacts, for example, to their Agile process template. So it's really a flexible tool. So again, make sure that the tool adapts to your needs. Don't adjust your team to fit the tool. You want to embrace the tool and its strengths, but you also want to make sure that that tool is customized to what your team is and how your team wants and needs to operate.
We are at the end. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. And it's been, again, such a privilege to be here. Both Shane and I extend our thank yous. And I believe we have time here to answer, or at least try to answer, questions that might be out there.
Yeah, thanks. This is Scott, Chris, and Shane. Thank you so much. We do have 10 minutes left, everyone. So what kind of questions did this trigger for you? Anything you're curious about? Looks like someone posted something in the chat. Is this implementation of DevOps? Does the dev team own the ongoing support of the environment and product line after delivery?
Can you read that again one more time, Scott?
Sure, yeah. It says, in this implementation of DevOps, does the dev team own the ongoing support, sorry, I lost it, of the environment and product line after delivery?
That's a great question, and the answer is they do not. And the way that we have positioned the platform right now is, of course, there's a series of products that are customer facing, firmware-based products. And what we've decided to do is to treat the DevOps platform. So that would include all the ADO pieces, the environments, and any sort of enabling tooling. We've actually decided to treat that as an internal product. So it should have a backlog. It should have its own team, because quite frankly, there's development that's going on there. Now, it's not development of a software product per se, but it is development of automation pipelines, build pipelines, et cetera, et cetera. So right now we're treating it as if it's an internal product.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah, good question.
And David's asking, what steps will you take next to move the team away from the requirements mindset?
I don't know that, Shane, you might have a thought on that. I don't know that we have a path towards that right now. There's certain hills to conquer and certain hills not to conquer. And I think, at least for us, there's a strong, I don't know if you heard the expression, strong opinions loosely held. I think on that one in particular, we didn't want to focus too much on some of the terminology. As long as we got the processes and the product mindset and the appropriate delivery mindset, we'll cross the other pieces. We'll cross those bridges another day.
And I will say this, what we have in place, even though we've got a word requirement there, I would say we're already kind of chipping away at that to an extent. We're using, and like Chris said, as long as they're focused on the product mindset and not the project mindset, that's already a big win. And just because we have this thing that's called requirement, if they treat it as a story, again, we're starting to chip away at that mindset as is. And if they're starting to see that this is a way that they can operate with and successfully with, then even if we keep calling that thing a requirement forever, at some point, does it matter?
I do understand, though, it's like fingernails on a chalkboard. Totally empathize with that.
How about this question? Who were the champions of this change in the company's leadership?
Great question. We had talked earlier about there's always been this innovation DNA in the company. So that really starts from the top down, and I don't honestly know where that originally started, but somebody certainly influenced that and has been influencing that. In this particular case around these products, there is a product owner and a technology owner that are both our sponsors, in those pairs, and they're driving all the vision around what we're doing.
Nice, thank you. Other questions?
And I should say they're excellent, by the way.
Nice. Is that because they're on the call, Chris? Or I'm just teasing. Folks, other questions for Chris or Shane? All right, we will take